How's it going, everyone? Welcome. My name is Sam with Swellset, and welcome back to the garage. We're picking up right where we left off. It's been all of 30 seconds for me, but it's probably been about 2 weeks for you. Should have been 2 weeks. And we're going to start glassing this board. It's summertime in Southern California, and my garage is probably about 95 degrees, so we're going to have to wait till tonight to actually start glassing the board, but we can get prepped first. So I'm going to tape off this board, and I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what my plan is. So I want to do a resin swirl on the bottom. I love resin swirls. I think they're really fun. I really enjoy doing them. So I'm going to do that on the bottom. The technique to do that requires you to have a clean, what's called a cut lap on top. So I'm going to use my scribe right here, which is this guy. I'm going to put a little dowel in it instead of a pencil, and that way it's going to leave a small indent across the length of the board where I'm going to line up my tape. And I'm going to add a couple more on there. But that way when the fiberglass is wrapped under, resin is on top of it, I have a clean line to be able to come back in with a razor blade and slice the fiberglass, and that way it leaves a really clean line. So we're going to get to doing that. I'm drenched in sweat, so I'm going to shower pretty quick here after I finish this, but let's do it. Here's the scribe and dowel that I told you about. I don't know if this is in frame or not, but like I said, I'm just going to go around and I'm going to mark it. All right, so now that that's marked, I've got two types of tape here. This stuff, it's 3M233, Scotch 3M233, if you know what that means. It's like 8 or 10 bucks a roll. Seems crazy, worth it, worth every penny. It's perfect for this application. But because it is so expensive, I get this on the line and then I fill it in with this. And you'll see that just gives me some more surface area to work with when I'm glassing. So let's go. Fishtails are a pain in the glass for a lot of reasons, but one of the big ones is because there's not a clean way to do a cut lap on here, right? Because you can't, it's hard to follow that shape and the glass doesn't wrap around that way, so you really have to kind of be creative with it. The technique that I like the most is where you just do like a straight line across here, and then it comes down to the edge of the board right here, and then just follows the inlet right here, and then comes right back up to this one. So that's what I'm going to do with. It gets a little bit hairy around here, especially when you're not as clean as I am with it, but we'll come back and with extra resin and all that stuff, it'll fill in nicely, it'll be good. So let's get to it. Awesome. Well, once it cools down in here, we'll jump back out in the garage and start glassing this board, but we're all taped up and ready to go. All right, so it's been a few hours. The sun has gone down. It's still a little warm in here, but it should be enough to glass. I'm just going to compensate for it a little bit with the amount of catalyst that I use. But by any stretch, let's get rolling. So the board is taped off. We're all good to go. Next step is rolling out some fiberglass. On this board, it's a retro fish, so I'm gonna go a little bit heavy. I'm gonna do one layer of 6 ounce on the bottom. We'll come back in and reinforce with some fiberglass around the fins as well afterwards, future stuff. And then I'm gonna do 2 ounces on the top. So not 2 ounces, 2 layers of 6 ounce on the top. Words are hard, man. But that should be good. That's what I've done on a lot of my boards. It's a standard heavy glass schedule, so it'll last longer and it'll be more dent resistant, which is fun. So I'm gonna throw on my apron and we'll get to rolling out some fiberglass. All right, so as I trim the glass around here, my goal is to make sure that I leave plenty of glass to make sure it gets the tape underneath on the other side of the board. So I'm gonna trim all the excess to just save on resin and glass, but I'm gonna leave it long enough here to make sure that it reaches that tape. I'm also gonna do some relief cuts at the nose and the tail so that the glass will wrap around a little bit cleaner. All right, so like I mentioned, sorry, I'm a little bit tall there. Like I mentioned, I'm gonna do a resin swirl for this board. First thing to note with the resin swirl is it uses a lot of resin. Generally about double of what you would expect for a normal board. I've got this chart right here from Greenlight Surf Supply. And for a board this length, normally take max of 25 ounces of resin, but because you don't want to smear it all over, you want to kind of get that swirl in there. Like I said, use about double. So I'll use probably about 45 to 50. And what I'm going to do is it's going to be a blue, like a Pacific blue base, and I'm going to have some accents of darker blue, some black, and some white in there. Just kind of get it all nice, fun colors. Should be a good time. So, and what I'm going to do, sorry, lots of things going through my mind. Resin has a timer on it. Once you mix in the catalyst, it's got like a 15-minute max working time, probably in this heat a little bit less. So I'm gonna mix up all these colors in these separate bins before I catalyze them. I'll do my big blue in here, my Pacific blue in here, and then all the other colors in here, these smaller containers. And I'm gonna mix them all together. I'm gonna catalyze them in their containers first, and then I'm gonna mix them all in here and give it with a paint stick one big swirl to just not combine them, but to at least like get them mixed. And then I'm gonna take that and then get it onto the board. So it's a big process. I'm not gonna be able to talk much like at all during it because I'm gonna be masked up. Yeah, hopefully I didn't miss anything. The resin I'm using is right here. It's Surfboard laminating resin, 249A clear resin. Just what they sell at the surf supply store. I'm gonna mix this up. I'm gonna use the ratios that are on there. So I'm gonna catalyze this at 1% or just under 1%, which for all these different buckets of resin, they'll have a little bit of different ratio, but I've got a measuring cup for that. So be sure when you're mixing resin, make sure you look at the correct measurements because you're gonna run into a lot of trouble if you don't. So I'm gonna mask up and let's start having some fun. Awesome. So you guys saw me laminate the bottom of this board, and it's been sitting for about an hour, and so we're ready to move on to the next step. But first, this board is a great example of why I just love resin swirls. I was expecting it to be a lot more of a blue base, but the color didn't take there as well, and it kind of got a little overpowered by the white and black, but it's a super fun color. I really like it. It's this gray swirly. I'll grab the camera and show you guys so you can see a little better. But it's just awesome. You kind of never know what you're gonna get. And I think that's super cool. So, and we ended up with a board that, I've never seen a board like this before, and I'm really excited about it. So, yeah, it's fun stuff. But let's flip this board over. We're gonna grab a razor blade and we're gonna cut along the tape line that we put on before. And that should leave us, if I did everything right, a nice clean line all the way around, which we're then gonna flip back over so that it can finish curing. But let's just do this now, and you want to do it before the resin gets too hard. That way you have an easier time cutting. So let's do it. I pulled you around to see how kind of finicky these fishtails can be. So I sliced it all the way down here on both sides, although it's a little bit hard to tell here. I think I got it all the way. And then so I have to come in at this angle here. And then once I get to the very bottom of the board, I've got to slide it in between, like right here, the tape and the edge of the board. And and it's just a super fun process. So fishes are fun. Now we super carefully pull this up because there's a good chance we missed some fibers in this section, and we don't want to ruin our glass job. Now we just carefully peel it all up. Again, looking for any spots that you might have missed cutting that glass. There's a couple marks here and there. There's definitely the dent of my scribe tool. I was leaning a little too much, and so I had to recorrect that line. And so you can see that obviously, but that'll come up and be filled with resin, so I'm not worried. There's a little bit of cleanup to do down here, but honestly, I'm pretty happy with it. I didn't point this out when I was doing it, but I left some flaps of resin just hanging off, knowing that I was going to come back here and trim them later. So I'm just going to do that now, again, before everything gets too set. That way it's just a little bit easier to work with. Once all of this resin gets fully set, then I would have to do this with a sander. So just do it with a razor blade while I have the chance. I will still come back with a sander though, and clean this up just to make sure that it's nice and flat and it won't cause any air bubbles for the next coat of resin. Okay, so it's the next day and our bottom lamination is cured. It's looking really good. So let's move on to the top, to the deck. We're going to flip it over. I'm going to sand over some of these, the parts where the fiberglass overlaps. And they're also going to do a trick to make sure that we can reduce as many air bubbles at the lap line as possible. So let's get into it. So first things, I always get a little bit of overlap on like the fishtails as well as the nose up there, just where the fiberglass kind of wraps around corners. And so I just like to kick this down with my sander here. I think I've got like 60 grit on here or something, just to even it out so when the next layer of fiberglass comes on top, we're not going to get any air bubbles right. So a trick that I learned from watching a YouTube video a few years ago is when you do a cut lap like this, there's always obviously a ridge where the fiberglass ends and the foam starts. And that's a really big problem point for air bubbles to get into your glassing. And so what you can do, I know like professional laminators will like use like a die grinder to go around there. I don't have one, and also I just feel like I would cut into the foam too much. So the trick I learned is to use a popsicle stick and to run that along the edge here just to kind of indent that line into the foam a little bit. Works really well, but yeah, let's do it. You just got to give it a little bit of pressure so it actually does push the fiberglass into the foam a little. And now the last thing I'm going to do before I'm going to lay out some fiberglass is there's a couple of indents up here. I think I was a little bit too aggressive when I was laying out my tape the first round, and I just got some crunches up here. So I'm just going to take my flex pad sanding thing from the last video when I was shaping, and just give it a light scrub over here. I don't want to change the shape of the board at all. I just want to kind of remove some of those little dents. All right, everyone, it's the next morning. It's just been too hot here to be able to glass in the afternoons or even the evenings, so trying this before the sun comes up. But we should be all ready to go. It's not too hot yet, so let's roll some fiberglass and let's have some fun. I know I mentioned this earlier, but the plan for this board is 2 layers of 6 ounce. That's very strong, gives the board plenty of ding resistance. It should be good. And also, as you're doing this first layer, you want to trim it to the bottom of the board. So you can almost just, especially since it's already been glassed now, you can basically just set your scissors on the bottom of the board and then cut. You don't need as much excess fiberglass as you will on the next layer. Now at the second layer, you're going to want to let it hang down quite a bit more because this is the one that's going to wrap underneath the board and give the real extra strength. When it comes to the overhang on this guy, I'm going to do what's called a free lap. That's in opposition to what I did on the bottom, which is called a cut lap, where I taped off everything. The top is just going to be clear. So I don't need to have a harsh line or anything like that to make it look clean and pretty. I can just do, kind of just let it hang, which is nice because it's easier, uses less tape. What I run into though is when I try a free lap on the first layer, so like on the bottom wrapping up to the deck, I always end up with some imperfections, and I can't sand them out because then I would dig into the foam too much, and so it always causes air bubbles in my laminations. So if any of you know how to fix that, let me know. However, when I'm going from the deck down to the bottom, when there's already some glass down there to give it some structure, even if there are some imperfections, I can just sand them out, which is really nice and convenient. So that's what I'm going to do. Saves a little bit of time, it's a little bit easier, and is more than sufficient for what we're doing here. I don't have to be as careful as I cut this line because I'm not trying to reach to a tape line underneath, so it can kind of hang where it needs to hang. The last thing before I move on for the rest of this board is as your fiberglass folds out this way on the fishtail, it's going to leave a dry patch. Obviously you don't want that, and so the trick behind that is to take an offcut of fiberglass, cut a little triangle out of it, and then nest that in there. So you can see here, now I can slide this in between my glass. And then I'm also going to give this a relief cut so it will lay flat as well. But now, it'll be hard to see, but I've got an extra layer of fiberglass in there that will lay down right in here and give it some support. So that's an important step to not skip over. Alright, so you just watched me laminate the deck, and it's looking really good, really solid. Got good saturation. I don't see any dry spots. There's a couple pieces of fiberglass to trim off, but overall great. One downside, I think I got a bug in the glass, which that's one of the unfortunate sides of glassing in your garage is it's hard to get it perfectly clean, just because you're in a garage. So that's a bit of a bummer, so I'll see what I can do about that. But what you didn't see me do was put on the logo. And I love to have all the logos on all my boards. And you can do it during the lamination, but for your first board, I figure like it's easier to just not and have it be separate. So let's get on and do that really fast. What I did is I printed out my logo onto a sheet of rice paper, which you got here. Super simple to do. There's a bunch of guides online on how to do it. You basically just tape rice paper on top of a standard printer sheet and then stick it through your printer. And then it comes out, cut it out to similar size, and then the white will just disappear underneath the fiberglass. So let's mix up some resin and pop it in there. Okay, I'm gonna try and make sure I don't stand in your way here, but it's super simple. I just drizzle a little bit of resin right over where I want to put it, like that. And I just have a blank like gift card here that I bought off Amazon a while ago in like a 100-pack or something for little ding repairs and things like this. So you spread out the resin a little bit, and then you get your logo, just lay it on top, like so. I'll put a little more resin on there just to make sure everything is saturated. You want to spread it out so that it's nice and flat. You don't get any air bubbles under there. And the whole thing is wet. And then you just put your fiberglass on top. And then similar to like your regular lamination, you don't want any dry spots or excess resin in there. So just come through and scrape it all clean, like so. And I got some drip here that I'm just gonna come and wipe up with a paper towel, I think. But yeah, can't even see the edges of the paper anymore. We are good to go. Let that cure and we'll be ready for hot coat. All right, so top lamination is cured. Logo is looking great. I took a small detour and did a leash loop on the bottom of the board, so there'll be a separate video on that one. It should be a quick one that'll come out in the next week or two. But next step on this board is hot coating it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna tape off the rails and we're gonna lay down some more resin. There'll be a voiceover, I'm sure, of explaining exactly the technique that I'm using. But for the tape, what we wanna do is do it right around the midpoint of the rail, maybe a little bit lower just so it makes the next step easier. But tape all around the edges of the board, the rails of the board. But we're gonna leave the hard edge free for the resin to just drip off and then onto the floor. And there'll be reasons for that later we can get into, but it's pretty simple and straightforward. So yeah, let's do it. All right, so I'm gonna talk through this just as I'm getting prepped here. The hot coat, what that is, for those of you who don't know, it's a separate type of resin that has some sort of wax in there. You lay that resin on the board using a brush, and as it cures, that wax will rise to the top and then give you a sandable surface to work with, because regular laminating resin doesn't do that for you. So that's what we put on top of the laminating resin, gives a sandable surface, and that way we can get it, once that cures, we can get the sand the board and get it flush and looking really nice. A couple things to keep in mind. It's called the hot coat because you catalyze it extra hot. So a laminating resin is catalyzed at 1% with the catalyst. Hot coat is 2%, so twice as much. So keep that in mind when you're working with it, that you'll have less of working time to be able to do everything you need to. Usually that's okay because hot coat is much easier. It's my favorite part of the process, and you can work much faster. Also, what I'm doing right now with the brush is, because I don't do this all the time, I don't have like a nice brush that I store in acetone to keep nice. So I just get these disposable brushes. 4 inches are better than 3 inches because there's more bristles and I just like them better. But I get all the bristles on a piece of tape to get all the loose ones out of it, because I just get these cheap chip brushes from Harbor Freight. They get the trick done because they're disposable to me. And they only cost about $1 per, so it's not too bad. But yeah, it's gonna be pretty easy. I'll go over the technique in a voiceover, but just get it on there, make sure everything is wet, and then don't touch it. Once the resin gels to the point where it's not dripping anymore, you come back in and pull the tape off. Easy peasy. All right, so we're making good progress on this board. We just finished hot coating the deck, which is looking good. We flipped it over and we took a break to install the fin boxes. So you'll see that in an upcoming video. It'll go in a little bit more depth as to just what to do. But to finish off this one, we're gonna hot coat the bottom. Let's just dig right into it. The one thing that you'll see, I'll talk about when I get to it, is when we tape off the board, you're gonna tape up to the line of where why can't I speak of words? You're gonna tape right up to the line of where the last hot coat ended and where you can see that fiberglass weave, just so that you make sure that way you're not double layering the hot coat on top of each other, and that you make sure that everything gets fully covered. So that'll be the trick. I'll grab the camera, see if I can get some close-ups and talk through it. But yeah, so we'll do that. And then once we get to where we had our hard edge, where we just let the resin drip off the board completely, that's when you're gonna stop your tape line and come up to the top and then make like a little resin dam all the way around it. That way it'll create a nice flush edge at the corner, which will release the water well once the board is finished. So we'll get there. It's pretty easy, but let's do it. So this is what I was talking about. Sorry, I'm just doing handheld here, so it might be a little bit shaky. But right here, you can see where the resin ends and then the fiberglass starts up again. That's where you want to get your tape line to. So just right in there, cover up the whole bottom half of the board, and then leave all of the weave exposed, because that's what you're going to fill with the hot coat. All right, our bottom hot coat, not lamination, our bottom hot coat is cured, and that's it for glassing, really. You can sand this down and surf it whenever, right? Surf it tomorrow, whatever it is, right? I'm gonna get going on sanding now, but I'm not gonna quite do that. I'm gonna cut the video here to kind of just keep it nice and clean, that this is the glassing process, and the next video is going to be the sanding process where we finish everything up. I am going to, however, do a quick sand on this and then throw a gloss coat on it. I'm not going to show the gloss coat because primarily it's the exact same thing as a hot coat. So it's a little bit different type of resin, give you a different finish, and that way in the next video I can show you sanding, and then from the gloss coat we'll sand it a couple more times and then polish it, and then we'll have a completed board, which will be super fun. I'm excited for it. But again, like I said in the first video of this, let me know if you have any questions. I'll try and go over it and do what I can in post commentary and everything else if I missed anything, which hopefully you saw and is good. But yeah, let me know if you have questions. I'll keep an eye on the comments for hopefully years to come, and I'll give you my best response. Should be fun. Thanks for watching along. Assuming everything's coming out as planned, the next 2 videos will be fin boxes and then also the leash loop I did on here, which was a fun thing to do. We'll see how that goes with sanding. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and stay stoked. I appreciate it.